All right, welcome everyone. Today we will be exploring how school leaders can design a comprehensive plan for engaging new hires from the very first day that they accept a job offer through their whole first year of employment. I am really excited to talk about onboarding and talk with you about all that we can do to ensure that an employee's first year on your teams is really excellent. And we're going to explore how school leaders and people who are part of the selection team can design a comprehensive plan for engaging new hires from the very first day that they accept that job offer through that whole first year of employment. So, to start us off, please add to the chat something that you have experienced going into a new role that made you feel like you were set up for success. An agenda from your first week, emails from a supervisor before starting the role to check in, an acronym cheat sheet, alphabet soup. Okay, well-designed training. Okay, I'm going to let you guys continue adding your thoughts. An invitation to call, persons. I see a lot of stuff in here about something that's personalized to your experience. These are really great. Our agenda for today, the top 5 things that we're going to talk about are a whole year of onboarding. So if you read today's session notes and thought, why does Emily keep talking about a whole year of onboarding? Isn't onboarding like a couple of days? No, it's not, and I'll explain why. And then we're going to talk about day 0. So we'll talk about what day 0 is, what that strategy looks like, how to roll that into a comprehensive onboarding plan. We'll talk about critical checkpoints throughout that first school year, how to involve key stakeholders in ensuring that that new hire is successful and satisfied with the decision to join the district or the school. And then we'll wrap up with a practical timeline template for an onboarding focused first year. So yes, we are going to cover all of that in the next 26 minutes. So let's talk about teacher turnover. This is not news to any of you, and I know that. Vanderbilt did this really extensive study, and it talked about specific instructional days that were lost when a teacher left that classroom middle of the year. Sometimes this is unavoidable. We completely understand that. Losing a teacher during the middle of the school year, nobody plans for that. But sometimes it's because of good old-fashioned attrition. Sometimes you have onboarded somebody and they are not working out and they leave in the middle of the year. That can result in a loss of between 32 and 72 instructional days. That's a lot of instructional days in a student's classroom, right? There was a study analyzing over 850,000 New York City 4th and 5th grade student records, and they looked at this over 8 years and found that higher teacher turnover within a grade level correlated with lower student scores in both ELA and math. No surprise there. That negative impact was particularly pronounced in schools serving low SES students. And so I'm sure that that's not all that surprising either. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we think about the mid-year turnover disrupting the continuity of a student's learning experiences and breaking that student-teacher, parent-teacher relationship, that really weakens the academic support system for students. And so we know that to be true, but what are some actionable things that we can do? What are some insights that we can glean actions from that can help us prevent some of those mid-year losses of teachers? One of those things is year-long onboarding. And so I want to talk a little bit about onboarding versus orientation. Orientation for the purposes of this discussion, and if your district swaps these around and you call orientation onboarding or onboarding orientation, that's okay, as long as you have a common language around this and you understand what we're talking about. When we talk about that whole first year, we're going to call it onboarding. But if you swap those two around and call that first year orientation, then that's perfectly fine, as long as you have a clear understanding and everybody, all of the stakeholders have a clear understanding of what it is that you're referring to. Onboarding is after orientation. It is really that entire first year of an employee's experience on your team. So we're all familiar with the adage, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And that sentiment becomes particularly salient when you're considering the beginning of an employee's life cycle with your school or district. Developing a district-wide onboarding plan that reflects the needs of a new employee from day 0 through day 365 gives you a great opportunity to help that person become part of the fabric of your campus, as opposed to relying solely on just a few days of orientation. So when we talk about onboarding, we're really looking at that whole first year experience. If you look at the life cycle of that whole first year as your opportunity to really help that person integrate into the society of that school, that foundational experience is going to set them up for better success, not only in that first year, but for more longevity in the role as well. So we'll look at taking a thoughtful and comprehensive approach to employee onboarding in order to have a more significant impact on a new employee's engagement, leading to better team and student outcomes, which is ultimately the goal. So we're familiar with the challenges associated with recruiting new teachers. This is another reason why keeping the awesome teachers that you've put all of that effort into hiring is important. The 2024 Arizona School Personnel Administrators Association, again, this has been the case for several years in a row now, showed that 25% of teaching positions still remained unfilled a few weeks into the school year. So developing and sustaining the educators that are brought in is critical. That deliberate, comprehensive onboarding program can make all the difference in reducing those attrition rates and increasing engagement and student outcomes. We also know that culturally speaking, losing a teacher mid-year affects more than just the classroom, right? It affects the other teachers on the campus. It affects leadership. It affects the whole culture of that campus. And so really considering year-long onboarding as your opportunity to develop the relationship and ensure that that person is set up for success for the duration of their career. So let's dive into day zero. This is the thing that I'm really excited about. For those of you who do not know what day zero is, we can call it pre-boarding. I think day zero has a more fun ring to it, more memorable. For somebody who's joining a new team, it can really feel like they're not just learning one new job, but almost two jobs, right? They're learning the job that they accepted, which is what they're expecting based on that job description. And then they're also learning the role that they'll come to play in that new workplace ecosystem. So they're learning a role, but they're also learning more globally where they fit, right? And sometimes that perfect hire quickly seems a little bit less equipped for success because they didn't necessarily have this runway by which to enter that new role. And so that's where day zero can really make a tremendous difference. Day zero covers all of the time between the day that they accept the position and the first day of reporting for work. So some of you might have people in day zero right now. You might have people in day zero in a month or in 2 months or in June. All of that time that passes between them saying, yes, I will accept this position, and you saying, great, show up on this first day of school. That is your day zero. So it can be a couple of days, it can be a couple of weeks, it can be a couple of months, but that is your runway to helping reduce anxiety about the role, maintain their excitement so that you don't lose them to some other offer, building connection, integrating culture. You're doing all of this and building that sense of belonging from the very beginning so that on day one, they walk onto the campus feeling prepared, feeling like they belong, feeling a sense of direction toward whatever it is that they're diving into. So some ideas that you will find even in your toolkit include creating a school spirit swag bag, mailing them a postcard. You could send them a postcard that everybody just kind of scrawls their names on who are going to be on their team. You can take them on a bus ride throughout the district. I loved this idea. One of our districts did this, and it turned out to be such a fun thing to do, especially for people who were newer to the area. So they had people on the bus who were new to the area, having just moved to this district that happened to be a little bit more rural. And then they also had people who were very familiar with the community and the sense of community that they built just on that bus ride saying, these are the schools in our district. This is your campus. This is the neighborhood. These are, I mean, you're probably waving at some of the kids out of the window who you're going to see on your campus here pretty soon. That bus ride was a really creative and really impactful idea for a day zero activity for some of those new teachers. This one's really important, a personal introduction to a buddy. So not necessarily their formal teaching mentor, but someone who you have identified would be a good buddy for them in that first year. And this could be something that is based on a commonality that you've identified. It can be based on some of those soft skills that you know in your staff or know in your new hires. Another idea is a classroom setup team. And so this one I think is probably largely personal preference, but if they're coming in to set up a classroom for the first time, especially if they're earlier in their career, having some people in there to help them out might be great. If you kind of get the vibe that they're like, no, this is my space and I really want to do this by myself, then, take that, kind of use your best judgment on those things, but a classroom setup team can be super helpful. And then informational emails. So some of you noted that in the chat a few minutes ago, just having expectations set before the first day, knowing where they're going to park, knowing what's expected of them, knowing what their food and beverage options are, knowing what time to come, having a couple of reminders about people's names or like names of places on campus, things like that, because there's so many things that once we're familiar with and comfortable in a role, we kind of take for granted. We don't necessarily remember all the different names of all the different people in all of the different roles. And so maybe the acronym chart would be helpful at that point, or a number of those things coming in. You can pull up in the toolkit and then scroll to page 5. So we have, in designing this toolkit, identified 7 different phases within the first year of an employee's experience. And we look at phase 0 or day 0, like we've been talking about. You go from this offer acceptance and then to this sort of welcoming phase. You're focusing on your students in your space, colleagues in collaboration, engagement, encouragement, adjustments, accountability, transition, rejuvenation, and finally reflection and renewal. So this is on page 5. And the reason I wanted you to take a look at this is because as we move throughout the rest of today's presentation, you're going to be referring to this document a couple of different times. So you have the whole day 0 explanation in there. And then when we move on to critical checkpoints, I want to spend a little bit of time on page 6. So after you've consumed this sort of phases summary here, go ahead and go to page 6. This is where you'll find the supervisor conversation guide. Now, this conversation guide is designed to be completed by the supervisor and the new employee 3 times throughout the year during phases 1, 4, and 7. A couple of caveats there. Does it have to be the supervisor having these conversations? No, it could be somebody else. It could be, so it should be somebody who's relatively close to the roles. If it's not going to work for you, for it to be a principal new teacher conversation or an HR tech conversation, if there is a better way to do this to make it work for you, that's okay. For the purpose of the conversation, we'll call it supervisor conversation, but if you decide a coach or a mentor is more appropriate, that's okay. The important thing is that this conversation is super collaborative and it happens at multiple points throughout the year, so that as that new employee is having that whole first year onboarding experience, you are taking notes about the same questions multiple times so that you as the supervisor or you as the mentor or the coach or whomever are really tracking the development of the answers to these questions. Does that make sense? So reading it and thinking about it like, okay, well, we just had this conversation 2 months ago, but so much changes in that first year of an employee's experience. There's so much happening all the time. And so asking those same questions and seeing how things develop. And then you're also kind of doing yourself a favor by having those notes, because you'll be able to say, oh yeah, I remember, hey, how did this thing go? Or you were really working on this goal, or you were really, there's outside thing was happening in your life. And you can follow up on those things and further build the rapport of those more personal conversations. So let this template be a starting point for getting to know one another and setting expectations for the time to come. It can be that tool for check-ins and review during different phases. And some of the answers may stay the same throughout the first year, and that's okay too. As perspectives shift, some nuances might shift. But when you leave this first meeting after going through this conversation, it is so critical that you both have total clarity on what success in this role looks like. And that's something I said before in this presentation. I would say it again. I think success is so very tied to clear expectations. And it's very easy to take that for granted, especially in a role where, each day has kind of its defined structure. But what does success look like, and how are you helping this new onboarding employee achieve that success? Okay, so we are nearing the time when you get to ask all of your questions. Let's first talk about stakeholder considerations. So when I talk about stakeholders, you're really that term, there are tons of stakeholders, right? The students are stakeholders, the parents are stakeholders, the recess aide is a stakeholder. They're your peers, the new employees' teacher peers or employee peers are stakeholders. We're going to look at 3 particular stakeholder considerations that I think are important in this first year in order to ensure that that onboarding process feels really comprehensive. And the reason I think it's important to have these stakeholders in mind as we move through this guide is so that you know kind of who is doing what. And I know that sometimes in small districts, one individual might play multiple roles, and that's okay, so long as the individual responsibilities of that stakeholder role are very clear. So if you need to change hats and be, coach and then some other thing, that's okay. Just know as you're looking at this onboarding experience, those stakeholder roles that you might be playing are pretty distinct. And so let's talk about the supervisor role. This could be principal, this could be HR director, this could be the lunch director of the food services, this could be any supervisory position. This person's role is to cultivate purpose. So the supervisor is talking about what success looks like, really establishing those success criteria. They're doing the formal check-ins, providing feedback, communicating vision, mission, goals. A lot of that stuff is built into the orientation. And so we can't take for granted that the new employee fully understands those things or has really internalized those things just because they're in the orientation paperwork or because they watched an animated PowerPoint on the topics, right? The supervisor is cultivating that purpose. The mentor is cultivating belonging. And so I know that word mentor can have different meanings as well. The cultivation of belonging, though, talking about the social norms, making those personal introductions, identifying what it is about this person that's unique. Sometimes those mentors are going to be the ones who see a glimmer of something before anybody else, right? And so they can really be the person to cultivate the belonging, not just from a social standpoint, but also to help propel that person to see even their own opportunities and their own unique traits. They're providing less formal support and they're leading by example. So if you are assigning a mentor, keep some of those considerations in mind. And then for human resources or human capital management directors, they're cultivating stability. And you'll see this on our guide in the next slide. They're really talking about policies. They're talking about documents. They're providing logistical support. They're helping set up all those more orientation focused tasks at first, but they're really still playing a role in this whole first year of onboarding. So now I want to show you, it's going to be teeny tiny to you. This is an onboarding process map and timeline. And it may look a little chaotic, but I promise it's actually super duper organized because you can see here this new employee in black is going from day 0 to party time after the 4th quarter. And it's color coded too, so you can see where HR's roles come in. Obviously, there's a ton of stuff that's not represented on here, but this kind of covers the general major chunks of where HR's role is. The supervisor is here in this kind of orangish color. These are really specific actions that a supervisor, and you can find this in the toolkit too, you can find this sort of supervisor checklist about all these specific things. And glancing at it right now, maybe you're thinking, well, yeah, of course we're going to do those things. But sometimes having that checklist, having that bulleted list, and just running down that is a really good reminder that some of the things that we tend to take for granted or the things that tend to get kind of snowballed into things getting really busy, it's really easy to miss some of those things. So the supervisor is there in the orange, and then you have sort of this mentor role there at the bottom in blue. These are things that can also be sort of delegated. So if you're going to mail a swag bag, or if you're going to do a note or something like that during day 0, or all of these different things, you can totally bring other people who will be interacting with this person into the fold so that they're making connections and that they're finding commonalities and feeling as though they are part of the community before they actually have students on that first day of school. So we have covered 5 major points of onboarding, including day 0. I know this was a ton of information. We're going to look at best practices, and then I'd love to have some discussion about what questions you have, what else I can provide some clarification on. For best practices that you can use, and again, it might seem like something that you can just fire off an email, but having that email template written 4 days before that role begins, they're going to get the email and it's going to have these really specific things in it. This is where you're going to park. This is what time you're going to show up. This is what you can expect. These are the documents that you need to bring. that kind of stuff. Having those email templates set up can really lighten the load when it comes time to do it. Creating and maintaining spreadsheets. If you do have a lot of new hires in one year, or if you have, especially if you brought on somebody in the middle of the year last year, this whole next year still counts as onboarding because they're still getting in through that first sort of year-long cycle on a single campus. So consider them part of your onboarding group. So throw together a spreadsheet so that you can track some data, make some notes, ensure that you're maintaining your connection with those new folks. If you have someone tapped for a specific role in their onboarding journey and that person becomes unavailable, don't assume that those things will get absorbed into other people's roles, and don't try to necessarily absorb all of that stuff yourself. Have a quick planning session, dole them out as necessary, or assign a backup for that, for whatever that role was. And then communicate and communicate and communicate again. These are your best practices for ensuring that anytime that you have gone through all of the tremendous effort that it takes to hire somebody to come onto your campus and join your team, that they have the best chance of success, the best chance of really integrating into the culture of your school from day zero through the 365th day that you've employed them. So now let's talk about questions, comments, ideas. What are you guys thinking? You have any good ideas for day zero, having listened to any of this or read some of your colleagues' ideas?
One of the things I mentioned to Emily is that I really liked the timing of this because I realized you're interviewing and hiring for the fall right now. But also, we had lots of hires mid-year who are still kind of relatively new, and I'm sure for a lot of them, you're hoping they return, and it's not too late to onboard if some of these steps may have gotten missed or you weren't quite prepared. It's never too late. So I would say those folks who maybe came on mid-year, plus those that you're hiring now, would really benefit from all of these concepts.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's read the next question. These ideas and practices are understandably so critical for teachers. I'm wondering how or if this is supported with funding sources, or if that's left to chance or to the individual leader at each site. Great question. I think that some of these things cost money and some of them don't necessarily. So a phone call, a text thread, a postcard, those things can be like minimal to no cost. As far as funding sources, I think that you all are the experts in where to cobble together some funding. So do you have any insight on that, Kendra or Leslie? Do you have any ideas about what type of funding sources might be able to support some of these day zero and onboarding initiatives? I'm assuming you mean things with like welcome baskets and things like that.
I mean, I do know that principals often are spending their own money on this, but you guys often will have a foundation principal fund that could help with this. There are people who will donate based on that. So like if you have, I know like even the HR department had gone out and tried to find like gift cards and that kind of thing. So you may have somebody in HR that could talk to vendors or community members to see if they could support with new teacher onboarding and that kind of thing.
When we hired new team members, Sarah and I went around the office in all the drawers and cupboards and found all the cute pens and sticky notes and the flare pens and stuff like that to cobble, like you said, cobble together a little welcome. But maybe it's not stuff out all the time. I mean, that is nice. But what are some gestures that maybe even go further? Because not everybody's love language is gift giving, right? So maybe it's more that, hey, let's meet for coffee or come to our campus and just take a tour. Let me just get you familiar before that first day of school when everything's, chaotic. Let's spend some quality time. Sit in on a PLC, sit with your new grade level. Some of those things will just go really far and maybe not cost anything but time.
And I think helping people feel more comfortable with their new teams or with this whole new staff, that they're the new guy, right? So if you provide them with a staff list, and it can be pictures and names and roles, or you could do a staff list that has a fun fact about everybody or something like that, that feels authentic to your school's culture without necessarily costing any money. And that can be sent via email.
One of the things, Emily, that I can share that we've done, I know was mentioned, was that bus tour. And they really loved it. As you know, we have oftentimes staff that join our state and they're not even familiar with the state, let alone the school district. So it's a great way for them to learn about the district, to see firsthand the residences, of course, of the home and the community. And we typically have someone from our city, a council member, join, and they're
That's
the
great.
ones that narrate the tour because there's so much history here in Tolleson, and that's always been very well received.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. One of our rural partners talked about their bus tour, and as they were going through it, they were remarking about, oh, last time I drove this road, that whole clump of houses was not yet built. So
Yeah.
maybe those students will be at our school, or hey, actually, I didn't realize that they were building a Starbucks right there, that kind of stuff. So it's fun to kind of get to be out in the community.
It really is.
All right, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you found this session helpful and that you are prepared to design a comprehensive one-year onboarding plan.